and then laser
Pointer. All right, thank you, sir.
All right.
All right, well, good afternoon. Like Cynthia said, my name is Katie Martin. I'm with the game department as a district wildlife biologist, so we do a little bit of everything, but a lot of our stuff is nuisance work. And Nathan and I are just kind of going to tag team this. We'll go back and forth, and then we'll try to hurry up the speaking part, and then he's got some traps here. We'll kind of show you some hands-on stuff, some of the fun stuff. And just holler if you have any questions. All right, so we're just going to run through just a couple of facts about some of the predators for livestock, and this I kind of tailored it to beef cattle, but it can go the same if you've got lambs, goats, anything like that. So most of these predators are kind of the same for all of them. So we'll talk about a few of those predators, and then what you can do to prevent it, and then what you can do once you've got them there, and kind of some things that go along with it, and then some resources. All right, so the big key, most of the time for these predators, they're not after good, healthy adult animals. They're not going to be able to take them down. Every once in a while, you'll have a predator that just wants to be out there causing trouble, but most of them, it's ill, animals that are injured, ill, and young. Those are the most vulnerable animals out there, especially your young. So your calves, kids, lambs, those are the ones that you really want to take precautions with and try to do most of your mitigation techniques for them. And prevention is always better than trying to stop it once it's happened. Once you've got an animal that's a problem, then it's a little bit trickier. You can do a lot of things prior to having a problem that will help you out a whole lot. And good record keeping and animal husbandry, those are really the two biggest techniques that probably most of y'all are already doing, and they'll really help you out when it comes to predators too. So this is a big one. Most of the time we'll get a call from somebody and they see a coyote eating on a calf and they say, well, this coyote's done come and killed a calf. And it could have been, it might have happened, but just because you see a coyote or you've seen a bear in the neighborhood or a bobcat and then it's eating on a dead animal does not mean that was the one that killed it. There's a lot of things that happen naturally to animals and they die, and then those predators, of course, they smell it. They're out there immediately. When an animal's dead or it's born stillbirth or something like that, predators can come in there pretty quick and start feeding on it. So just because it's eating it might not have been the one to kill it. So we always caution folks, don't jump the gun and say who done it. That's where we can come in. You call us. We've got a lot of good resources on being able to look at animals, how they were taken down, what the hooves look like on an animal. Has it even walked yet, or was it born stillbirth? What do the bite marks look like? Where it was being fed on, and can tell you pretty accurately what killed it. So here are common predators for most livestock. So the biggest one, the one we probably hear the most about, coyotes. And they definitely can be a predator. But the number two one are dogs. And that's both domestic dogs, somebody's dog that's a pet that's just running loose, and then feral dogs, ones that have gotten out and kind of packed up and become pretty much wild again. Bobcats, really not to much extent, but we'll talk about them just a little bit. Bears, every once in a while. Birds, vultures, the birds of prey, those are some. And the reason I put the little tiny dog down there, just because a lot of people, when you think of a dog, you think of like a big, mean pit bull, German shepherd, something like that. It can be some pretty tiny, domestic, friendly-looking dogs that are actually out there causing trouble. So hopefully not that guy. I don't think he'd have much of a chance out there on anything. All right, so we'll start with coyotes here and just go through some of the basic stuff about them, and then we'll kind of talk about things we can do to prevent problems. So they are the most common predator, and it's mostly lambs and goats. That's what we get most of the calls about because they're tiny, especially goat kids and lambs. Those are pretty tiny little animals, but they will bother calves, and that's where Nathan comes in. He can help out here with them. And it's not all of them, though. Just because you see a coyote on the farm, you've heard them out there before, not all of them are the problem animals. You've usually got a couple in the group that are the problem animals. They're coming in, they're killing, but it's not all of them. So that's why you need a targeted approach to kind of get rid of those that are problems. So some basic facts about them. Their breeding season is pretty much right now. They're breeding, they're monogamous for 1 year while they're mating this time of year. They'll stay with that mate just for the year. About 2 months later, they'll have their pups in a den, and it's anywhere from like 4 to 8 little pups. Look like little dog puppies pretty much. You'll see them out in the den, and the female, she's taking care of them. They'll get to scrambling about usually about the time the turkeys are out. When turkeys are gobbling, that's when coyote pups are usually out. Most of the time they're solitary. You don't see them a lot in packs. We do here in the east. They actually act a little bit different than they do in the western part of the country. They will stay in family groups more. So it's not technically a pack like a wolf. Wolves travel in packs and they kill in packs and take down things. The coyotes don't really travel like that in packs. You'll see a few lone ones out. Usually it's the yearlings, the subadults that'll be out hunting, so you'll see 1 or 2 of them. But they do come back and actually stay in a family group of about 6 or 8. Most of the time, dawn and overnight, early mornings when you're going to see them, in the evenings, and then through the nighttime hours. But it's not unusual to see them in the daytime. So it's not, if you see one in the day, doesn't mean it has rabies or anything's wrong with it. Any of you guys that have cut hay during daylight hours, I'm sure you've seen them following the tractor. They know if they follow you around on that hay cutter, you're going to run some rats and mice out to them, something good to eat. So they'll come out in the daytime. Their home range is pretty huge, although here in the east it's a little bit smaller. So generally we say about 5 to 13 square miles, where 1 square mile is 640 acres. So that's pretty huge. 2 to 3, you're looking at several thousand acres that these guys can travel on in just a day or 2 period. And they just kind of go through that territory, checking it out. In the fall, the males, they get dispersed. The females tell them, all right, we're tired of y'all, you've got to kind of kick out. So a lot of times the female, she'll keep with her any of her female pups, and they'll stay with her, and a lot of times they'll stay with her for several years, maybe their entire life will all be together. And a few males kind of roam in and out, but a lot of the males get kicked out. They have to go and find their own territory, and they'll travel a good distance to kind of set up their own space. So in Virginia, they're considered a nuisance species, so you're allowed to shoot them any time of year. There's no defined season for them, no defined weapon you have to use. And as of July 1, you can shoot them on Sundays now. So it used to be, this presentation, I would say, any day but a Sunday. But now I think looks like that's going to pass, so you can shoot them on Sundays as well. It's a continuous season on private lands, but like on wildlife management areas, state forest, national forest, those areas you can only shoot them during hunting seasons. They are closed during certain times just to kind of not disrupt the use while other people are out there. But they are considered a nuisance, so there's no really many regulations on them. So this is always, when I go to talk a lot of times to counties or talk to folks about coyotes, they figure, well, bounty, that's got to be the golden ticket right there. That'll solve the problem with coyotes. Unfortunately, it really doesn't. A lot of times it just ends up taking a lot of money away from a county. The game department does not set bounties. We don't tell a county whether they can or can't have one. Each county's board of supervisors, they decide that and set it up. They'll call us sometimes for recommendations, and if they do, we try to persuade them that it's not worth their money and they probably have better things they could spend that money on. The biggest problem is coyotes have density-dependent reproduction. So if you kill just a few coyotes, all you're doing is making them breed more and have larger litter sizes. To really do any good, you'd have to remove about 70% of that population each year. Well, across a county, there's just no way you'll remove 70% of the coyotes in a year. I mean, that's just impossible. On one farm, you might be able to do it with a real targeted approach. So that's why other management techniques you can use on your farm are much more, that's a better deal than trying to do this countywide. It ends up getting abused a lot of neighboring counties. If your county's got the bounty, somebody will shoot coyotes in the next county over or trap them, and they're going to take them over to that county that's paying $50, $75 for them and try to get the bounty. And it ends up being a lot of domestic dogs killed. When folks have that money idea, they just start shooting without looking real good. So bounties are not worth it. Here's just a little bit about that. They'll end up, if you take the population down just enough that it's not hitting where it's going to be low enough to actually keep them down. So you're taking about 3 to 5% of that population. Well, all they do, they start breeding more often. Some of the juveniles will breed. More of the females in those family groups will breed, and you just end up with more coyotes. They just come right back to that level they were before. So that's, again, why the bounties don't do much. So some of the lethal methods that are good on a farm if you're having problems with it, or you just are interested, you've seen a lot of coyotes around, you think you've got a pretty healthy population. Some things you can do: trapping, shooting them, hunting them, are all legal methods that you could use. So both of these are just 2 types of traps, and Nathan will talk more about the trapping side of it here in a little bit. A foothold trap or a snare trap. Both of those are legal to use in Virginia. All right, well, Nathan, I'll let you talk about your program here since we got your slide up. I'll give you the, there you go. All kinds of microphones for you.
Well, as Katie said, I'm with the USDA Wildlife Services, and pretty much what my program is livestock protection, mainly geared towards coyotes is what it's mainly for. We deal with other predators as well, mainly with sheep. Foxes can cause problems to them, some bobcats, usually with the lambs, but coyotes is mainly what it's geared for. As Katie said about the coyotes and how they are, with their home ranges and stuff like that, it makes them tough to catch at times because they might not be on your farm all the time, and that's where I can come in and set a trap, and that trap will be there working, usually whenever you're not there. I got different traps up here and snares like Katie had in that picture earlier, and I've got some pelts up here as well. I'll pass them around. It shows the different color phases of the coyotes. The coyotes don't always look like the ones that she had in the picture. They can vary from red tint to black and then to brindle, about like what she had. But with the program, the livestock protection program, it don't cost the farmers anything for our services. I can come out and take a look, see if you do have a coyote problem, make recommendations, that would help prevent coyote, problems from coyotes. Keep them out, good fencing, stuff like that. And like Katie said, we're not going to eradicate these coyotes. My main goal is getting rid of the problem coyotes. And that's mainly what I'm geared for more than getting rid of them, because you can't get rid of them. They're going to move right back in. A few years ago, I put a collar on one down in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it had one of them GPS collars on it. Well, it made it all the way up to Hanover County in 3 months. That was 300 miles that it traveled in that time frame. So, that just goes to show one reason why the bounties don't work is they're going to just come in from other places. But that's mainly what the program is just to help the farmers out, and if they've got problems, and we can help them out before you have a problem, and that's what we try to do, but it's not that possible. I cover from Lynchburg east, so I cover pretty much half the state, and usually how I work is I'll come out, and if I set equipment on you, traps or snares, I have the farmer checking it, and with the laws the way they are, we got to get them traps checked every day. So I have the farmers usually checking my equipment for me, which allows me to work several properties, and usually that's how I work. And most of the time, if you've had problems in the past, we'll come in there and try to hit them coyotes before you're calving, before you're lambing during that time of year. But, pretty much I'll prioritize it by if somebody else is having killing, I'm going to get that stopped before I can go around and do any preventative work. But I'll pass these pelts around and this trap, and that way you can see them a little bit here too.
Maybe I'll just leave the dog one off.
All right, you take lights.
Sure, that'll work. Well, speaking about dogs, maybe we'll delete this slide and keep going. All right, so dogs are a big problem. A lot of times when we go out to a farm and folks think they had a coyote problem, it could be a dog problem. And it can either be, like we said, pet dogs, somebody's friendly-looking pet that you wouldn't think would ever kill anything or chase anything, to dogs that have just been turned loose and gone kind of feral. So either one of those. Breed doesn't matter. We've seen everything, labs, beautiful dogs that will kill livestock. It's in their genes to do that. They get out there and, they get excited. They can kill livestock. Most of the time, they're just out to chase it. They really don't want to kill it. They don't know what to do once they've killed it. They just get into chasing them. So the way you can tell, and this is again where anybody can call us and we can try to help figure it out, and it's important. Some counties, if a dog kills livestock, their county will pay for that. The animal warden comes out, certifies it was a dog, not a wild animal, and the county will pay them for that. So it is important, if you have livestock that's gotten killed, to call somebody and let them know, get somebody out there to look at it. But coyotes, they're efficient predators. That's what they do every day. They have to kill to make a living. So when they go after something, they kill it pretty quickly. They don't just mosey around and take their time about it and make a mess of it. They're pretty efficient at it. If you go into a flock like a sheep or something, or even cows that have had a coyote working around in there, most of the rest of the animals are not that upset or disturbed. There could be a calf that's been killed, a lamb that's been killed, but a coyote comes in so quick, it kills it, and that's it. It doesn't stay around and mess around with the rest of the animals. Dogs, on the other hand, they chase, and it's usually several of them, and they're running animals around. They don't know how to kill it, so they end up chasing a lot. You'll see a lot more wounding on the animal. You'll get either calves or lambs, anything like that. They have a lot of bite marks on the back of their legs, bite marks up on their flanks, around their nose and face. That's usually a dog. A coyote doesn't do all that biting. He just bites it once where he needs to, and he's done with it. Coyotes, they usually only kill just one or two. They're killing it to eat it, not just for the fun of it, for the chase of it. So they'll kill it, go ahead and be eaten on it. Dogs could come in and kill several at a time and just leave them and not even feed on them at all. Usually your coyotes, they're going to be killing things around the edges of fields, not out in the wide open. They like to be near cover. They feel safe in cover, so they're going to come out close to cover to make a kill. A dog could be out anywhere. Like I said, they're coming through any time of day or night. But usually the biggest thing is where the animal was bitten and what that animal looks like. If it's a nice clean kill, that's probably a wild animal, a predator. If it's got a lot of bites and looks pretty bad and the rest of the herd's pretty stirred up, a lot of times that's dogs. All right, so bears are not as common a predator for livestock, but it does happen, especially spring and summertime. They wake up, they're pretty cranky and they're pretty hungry, and they can get after things, and it tends to be the times when you've got a lot of calves coming down and lambs and kids, goat kids out there, not people kids, that they might get after. So pigs actually seems to be one that they prefer more than anything. They do love pig. They don't seem to be much of a problem with other livestock. We did have a lady over in Roanoke County that had some real fancy llamas, and we did have a bear she had a tendency to go after llamas, but other than that, we haven't had too many problems with bears. But they have a very distinctive kill. They come in and they're going to hit it right at the neck and the shoulders. There won't be bites on the throat, nothing torn up usually on the rear end. They come in, they kind of do a blunt impact on the side and pull the animal over to kill it. And I have some pictures next of a animal in Buckingham County we had about 2 years ago that was a bear killing calves, and so I can show you the pictures. I'll warn you, are not pretty, but at least it goes kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. You usually see claw marks on it because, I mean, that's what they do first. They're going to hit it with their paw first, and then they bite it. They can drag the carcass. That's a big, strong animal. So a lot of times you'll see them, they'll kill it, and then they move it over to at least the edge of a fence or somewhere in some deep cover, and they might cover up some of the carcass. Now, bobcats will do that too, but bears, it'll be a big mound of vegetation that they'll pile up over the carcass. And usually there's some other signs that a bear's been around there. You know, if he's there long enough, he'll use the bathroom and kind of give you an idea that he's been around there. So if anybody doesn't, is a little queasy, I'll say sorry for these next couple of pictures. So this was a unique situation up in Buckingham. This fellow was taking dairy calves and just feeding them out, so it was all steer calves he was keeping. So these were small calves, about 80 to 100 pounds, with no mama cows in there with them. And it was a really small pasture, about 10 calves, I think, at the most, 10 or 15 is what he had in there. And he just started having calves. One night had 2 die. Next day he came in, he had 3 out there laying dead. And at first he didn't know what it was, hadn't called anybody, and then finally about 3 weeks later he had 7 laid out there all at one time. And the bear was not actually even feeding on it. But that right there, it's a pretty good, that's up on the shoulder. You can see the claw marks in it. Once we saw it, it was like, yep, that'd be a bear. And so it fed on it a little bit. A lot of times they will feed right down the spine, or they'll feed on the belly. So that's just a perfect image of it feeding on the backside there and then feeding some on the belly of it. But these were small calves. Turned out it was a yearling bear. I think he was just playing. He really didn't mean to kill him, but he ended up playing and then got a little rough with him and killed him. So that bear had to be taken care of. But they will occasionally mess with livestock. Not that often. Like I said, those calves had nothing in that pasture with them to help protect them. They had no mama cows, no donkey, no nothing out there. And the landowner didn't live at the property, so it was pretty wide open for things to be out there. So bobcats, this one's pretty rare. I mean, bobcat's 30, 40-pound animal. It's not taking down anything real big, but occasionally a goat kid or a lamb, something like that, it could take down. These guys love thick cover. You're not going to see them walking out in the middle of a pasture. So if you've got pastures that are way in the back, got a bunch of gullies and ravines in them and thick cover, that's where you possibly would have a problem with a bobcat stalking around. And really, that's where all the wildlife predators would be, is in those nasty areas. They too do a bite right on the back of the neck, like right where the skull and the neck meet up. There'll be a real pretty bite right there, and they've got real distinct canine teeth. I mean, you can see it. When they make a bite, it does a puncture that you can tell, yep, that was a cat. And sometimes they'll go for the throat, but usually they're around on the back, and they'll have some claw marks. But that one's pretty rare for cattle. So this one we probably get more calls about, and Nathan probably gets a ton of calls about, are the vultures. And they're not so much with your adult cattle, but with your calves, and coming and poking and stabbing them and end up killing them by getting them in the eyes there. So the big thing to realize, the top picture is the black vulture, and that's the one that's the problem. They're real aggressive. They're a little bit smaller than the turkey vulture, which is the bottom picture. The black vulture doesn't have the red head, so he's completely black, kind of has that grayish looking head. Usually if you see one, you'll see like 20 of them. They're in a big group, and they're not really afraid of people. You can walk right up to them within about 20, 30 feet before they'll ever fly off, and then they'll fly off and come right back again. I mean, you have to be pretty aggressive with them to get them to leave. But they can be real aggressive. Now, the trick with them is they're a federal bird, so they're protected. So whatever you do, don't touch one until you have called and gotten the right permit, or at least don't tell me about it, because it'd be a bad deal. And we don't regulate it. That's a federal. That's Fish and Wildlife Service, so that's a bad one. You can call the number I showed earlier on there, and I can go back to that at the end if y'all want to see it. It's the Mosley Field Office for the USDA. If you call up there, explain the situation to you. Nathan works a lot when he's out on the farms. He can do some vulture work and help with the harassment. That's usually they start with that, try the harassment first, but you can get a permit to kill them if you're having calf losses, because people understand that's money that you're losing there. Alright, so some of the things you can do prior to having problems and needing to trap or shoot or anything like that, there's a whole lot of things that probably you're doing already, but just a few little tweaks and changes can help mitigate any problems with wildlife. So fencing, bringing animals in at night if that's possible. If you have anywhere that you can bring in animals that are about to give birth, whether it's cows that are calving or lambs, sheep, goats, anything like that, if you have a shed or even just a lot that's closer to your house or closer to the buildings, that helps a lot. Removing any dead animals that you've got out in the field, and not just taking them and throwing them down the gully, still in the pasture somewhere, or just right off the pasture, burying them or getting them as far away from your pasture as possible, because any dead animal, it's amazing how quick, those vultures especially, it's within an hour, they smell something and they're already there on it. So you've just attracted now a predator to your property. Coyotes, same way, they're going to come and try to get an easy meal. Deterrence and guard animals, we'll go through some of these. The best thing to do, it's going to take a mix of all kinds of things. Some lethal, some non-lethal methods will work out best. All right, so fencing. I'm sure everybody probably has a fence unless they're free-ranging, but fencing is one of the best things you can do for keeping wildlife out. A good sturdy fence that keeps your animals in is going to keep wildlife out. A nice woven wire fence with a piece of barbed wire at the top, that's an excellent fence right there. Coyotes can't really go through that. Most of your other predators aren't going to try to climb that either and get through it. If it takes a lot of hassle for that predator to have to get over it or get through it, they're not going to do it, because that's more time that they're exposed and out and something can get them. It's just not how they operate. So we'll come back to fencing here in a minute. Adding just a little bit of electric wire. A lot of times if folks have had problems with animals climbing in or coming in, one little strand of electric wire on the outside of that fence does a world of wonders. Guard animals, a lot of farms you go by nowadays, you see, if it's most of the people, it seem like they have sheep, they've got the dogs. If they've got cattle, they've got donkeys out there. I've heard llamas. I haven't seen anybody use a guard llama. I don't know how mean a llama can be, but maybe they can be right mean. But we'll talk about that here in a second. So a good fence is the key. It's keeping your animals in, keeping the bad stuff out. And I know Nathan and I were on a visit a while back, and the fellow on the phone told us he had a real good fence. And so in my mind, I had a picture of a fence kind of like this, and then we got out there, and the fence was about knee-high, one strand of barbed wire. And that wasn't the best fence for keeping anything out or in, as it turned out. So, a good 3 wires is usually a little bit more helpful. That can keep things out. Using electric wire is always good. If you have problems with stuff digging, putting one wire down buried in the ground, you can stop things from digging. But most animals, a good woven wire, just high tensile fence like that, and one strand of electric wire works wonders on them. All right, like I said, most of these predators, they're out at night. So if you have any way to bring animals in at night, of course, on a large operation, that's not going to be feasible, but especially animals that are either injured, they're ill, you've got some weaker animals, maybe some cows that are not doing as well, if you can bring them in, or any animals that are about to give birth, if you have a place that you can bring those animals in and keep them in, that really helps a lot. And even just having a paddock or a pasture that's closer to your fences, closer to your sheds, buildings, anywhere where you're in and out a lot, there's more disturbance there, and that's going to keep those predators out of that area. So just bringing those in can really help. Like I said, removing any dead carcasses immediately, that's always good. And then rough pastures, if you've got some old pastures that are just way in the back, you don't get out to them very often, they've got a lot of broom straw growing up around the edges and, big old lap piles near them, they're near a big cutover that's got a lot of brush and weeds in it, that's just a place where the predators are going to be in that habitat. So if that ends up being the pasture where your cow's going to calve, she's just right near where a lot of predators could be. So if you can maybe just rotate your pastures around, keep them up in an area that's closer to buildings, closer to your house, that can help out a lot. Deterrents, these are just kind of one of those, some folks, they don't want to kill something, so they want to try this first. These are not super effective. They can work for a short time, but you have to be out there all the time using them, and animals get used to it. So like the propane cannon, first couple of times that thing goes off, it scares everything away, but pretty soon they realize nothing really bad happens from that. Strobe lights, people will stick up lights that'll flash at motion, come on at odd hours, music. People have tried having radios out there. All of that can work for a really short time, but it doesn't actually work long term. So the guard animals, like I said, most of the ones we see are the donkeys or dogs out there with folks. The key with that, I think some people, they go down the road, you see somebody's got a donkey, they buy it and they stick it in there with their cows. Well, it really doesn't do much good if that was more somebody's pet donkey beforehand and it's not really adapted to be with cattle and it just follows you around instead of hanging out with the cows. They also say it's better to only have one out there. If you put 2 or 3, they end up just hanging out with each other and not really worrying about the cattle or lambs or whatever they're supposed to be watching over. So you kind of have to find somebody they're raising donkeys for that purpose to be guard animals, and then just you stick them out there with the herd and you kind of let them be. You don't baby them a lot, don't give them a lot of human contact, and just make them realize they're part of that herd, and that way they'll become better guard animals. Usually it's a nice idea if you put one of those signs out there. I know I've kind of gotten chased out of a few pastures that didn't have a sign, and donkey didn't really like me being in the pasture, so it's always good. Usually a good one is going to run anything out of there, so that's good. Runs a dog out, runs people out, that's pretty good. So these are just a couple of websites. They've got some really good information on, predator control, where to find. The top one up there, that website didn't have it, but Texas A&M is linked off of that first website, and they have got really good predator guides. It shows a lot more pictures of what different kills look like, things you can do to mitigate having problems, so those are good. The Guard Animals publication, that one has a lot of information about where to find guard animals, what to do when you get one, how to kind of train one so that it acts like a guard animal and not a pet. The Sheep Handbook, that just has really good fencing information in it, and it's applicable for cows or horses or anything, not just sheep. So that just had real good fencing and good information about that. And then the USDA websites give kind of an overall report statewide of incidents that they've had, and then also they've got some good publications on there about fencing and what to do for protection. So I believe that is it. If anybody has any questions. Yes, sir.
Are coyotes nocturnal, or are they most active during the daytime?
They call it crepuscular, so they like to be out early morning and then overnight, but you can see them anytime, especially this time of year when it's cold. They're going to come out when it's not so bitter cold, so middle of the day, mid-morning, you'll see them.
You say they like to be out at night?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they prefer to move in the middle of the night. That's when you'll see a lot of them or hear a lot of them, but it's not unusual to see them in the daytime. Yep. So they have them usually about April, and then they'll keep them with them about 18 months. So a year to 18 months they'll keep them. Now some of the males they'll get rid of. They're about like a bear. The males they might get rid of after about 8 to 10 months or a year. She'll go ahead and kick them out. But the females could stay with her at least for a year or on upwards 2-3 years. So it just kind of depends. Yep.
What kind of bait do you use for your leg hole traps?
It varies.